Everybody seems tonight. Come and Tuesday, I feel better. Even my own mind.
Thank you, Milton. All right. Okay, welcome Econ students. I know you probably have Friday in your mind. Well, not exactly our usual Thursday and Friday. Can you see that all right? All right. Again, I will send this board to you, so if you have a little trouble reading it, don't worry about it. I will send it to you later on today. Okay? As you can see, even the rabbits now, I've got them into reading economics books. The Wealth of Nations, and it didn't have to be this way, by one of our other professors, Harry Reiser. Okay, we left off with, we're talking about isoquants or indifference curves. And I just wanted to touch on a few things to make perfectly clear with them. When we look at them, I look at an indifference curve, it's a consumption bundle. It's different goods, all right? And in different combinations. The main thing to remember is any point on this line, you are going to be equally happy or indifferent. It doesn't really matter. It's generating the same amount of satisfaction for you. However, a shift up to a further out isoquant, further out indifference curve, means there are more goods and services generating. Long and the short of it is there's just a generation of more utility. So you're happier or more satisfied. As we talked about last time, money doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be happy, although it does take the harsh corners off life. All right, so they shift out and you become more satisfied. But on any point, on any one of these curves, you are equally satisfied. All right? Okay. Now, two effects. We did talk about the substitution effect and the income effect. I just like to show what that looks like on the graph. Suppose we had a budget from your book, again, we had a budget of $10. Well, if you can buy 10 Pepsis at $1 or 5 pizzas at $2 each, your budget line would look like this purple line right here. Now, substitution effect comes into play when, and we already know this, the price went up, okay? In this case, in the case of our textbook, the price of Pepsi doubled. Well, your budget line, if you only have $10, now you have to move back to 5. So this shifts back to here. You can still stay with the number of pizzas if you want, because it's Pepsi that went up in price. So an increase in one particular good, that is going to cause you to substitute for another good. But look what happened. This point right here, that was our optimization point, okay? We talked about this last time. It's where you're getting the biggest bang for your buck per price. And that is equal to all the other marginal utilities divided by their price. So when you got marginal utility of pizza over the price of pizza is equal to the marginal utility of Pepsi over the price of Pepsi. When you get, that's going to give you your optimization point. So here, and what you're striving to do basically, as we talked about with just making a decision in economics, what are you trying to do? You're trying to maximize your happiness, your utility. We talked about that, I think, the very first week of class. Well, here, you're trying to reach the furthest out indifference curve with your given budget. And that would happen to be the curve that it just touches it, or is, as they say, is tangent to the curve, okay? Now, with the increase in Pepsi, now you're off this curve, and you'll have to be on another one. Now, in your textbook, a couple of things can happen. We could find a new one here, and that might be fine. Or there's what is called the income effect. Now the income effect, that doesn't rotate your line from here to here. That just shifts parallel everything back, all right? But still, the key is the same. You're trying to find the isoquant that is furthest out, which will be tangent to your new line, all right? So I just want to clarify that. There may be a question on that week from Friday. Week from Friday is your last exam, okay? All right. So, and again, they illustrate our happiness, indifference curve, the 4 rules of indifference curves. They slope downward because there's an inverse relationship between the 2 quantities, between the Pepsi and the pizza. The higher the indifference curve is, the happier you're going to be, okay? Or the more satisfied. Again, money doesn't necessarily buy happiness, okay? And then they cannot intersect because, again, that's a contradiction in terms. You've got a consumption bundle here that's generating so much happiness, it can't be equal to a smaller consumption bundle, okay? All right, so they can't touch, they can't intersect, and they're curved, they're convex, because as you're approaching giving up a lot of one, the good that you're giving up becomes more and more precious to you. So you're going to want a lot of the other good, okay, just to give up a little. In this case, if it was Pepsi, when you got down to where you've given up quite a bit of Pepsi, and you only got a few Pepsis left, those Pepsis are going to be very precious, and you're going to want a large amount of pizza. That's why the line goes like that. A large amount of pizza to replace one of your, few remaining Pepsis, and vice versa. If you had only a few pizzas left, you would want an awful lot of Pepsis for one of those few slices of pizza. All right, so that takes us and finishes off on a difference curve. I'm going to backpedal a bit because we should spend a little time on poverty. Some of this is from your book, some of it is not from your book, so pay attention. In 2015, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of, guess what? The War on Poverty. It was all the way back in 1965. President Johnson started the War on Poverty. He was a president that passed a number of social reform bills, and one was the War on Poverty. Unfortunately, he also had the war in Vietnam at the same time, and as we know, it's tough enough on a country to fight one war. It's really tough on a country to fight 2 wars at the same time. But anyway, it started. 1965, the War on Poverty. I mean, it sounded great. No one wants to see a person suffering or not having a lack of food or medical attention, anything. None of us want that, okay? But here's the thing. 2015, 50 years later, and depending on the study that you look at, and I've seen some unbelievable studies, but if you take every single government program, every single one, from local government to state government to the federal government, and you take every single social program that all the governments of the United States has, and you took all the money that they spent on, we're just grouping every possible social program together, all right, over 50 years, it comes to an astounding figure, a figure you can't even believe. It's many, many trillions. It's more than 10 trillion, more than 15 trillion. It's more than 20 trillion. $20 trillion, okay? So, and again, it depending on how the study is conducted, but there was a study that came out and it said, quite frankly, $22 trillion was spent in 50 years. Now that's would be on every single possible social program of every single government. But here, so we have 50 years of spending $22 trillion. How are we doing? Well, in 1965, roughly, we had about 25 million people. And don't give me the population has increased a lot since then. Population, regardless. 2015, we have 50 million people who are technically considered poor. After spending $22 trillion, well, it doesn't take an economist to know something's wrong, okay? We got 50 million people below the poverty line. You're going to have to remember this. I can almost guarantee this will be one of the questions on Friday's exam, okay? The 50 million now, below the poverty line. What's the poverty line? Some books call it the poverty line. Some books call it the poverty threshold. Basically, it's that spot that you are just able to afford the absolute bare minimum amount of water and food and perhaps a scrap of clothing, just enough to barely keep you alive. All right? Below that, you're considered poor. I guess you would be considered poor. And God forbid, none of us ever get that way, but this is what bothers me. We go from 25 million to 50 million. And we spend $22 trillion and we still have this many people poor. That's not right. When I was at Georgetown, I was a researcher and those were the old days when we did research. When we opened a file, we didn't whip out our snappy phones and just flip a finger. We had to drive to a city, drive to a building, and go in the office building and literally open a file. I did work for one of the most brilliant research economists at Georgetown, and she did an awful lot of work for Senate subcommittees for the United States Senate. And we did a lot of work, I did a lot of work for her, and she always said this, and it always stuck in my mind. She says, the three adjectives that best describe a government agency: inefficient, ineffective, and overlapping. And when you take these three and you apply it to this, you can see how we spent all those trillions of dollars, and we ended up going from 25 million to 50 million. She was right. She was right actually about an awful lot of things. She was way, way ahead of her time. Okay, basically, to put it simply, government assistance can be money transfers or in kind, which would be food stamps. Money transfers, the poverty trap comes up. Not unlike, in a sense, taxation. Now, taxation, the government, again, does not want to tax you too much so it kills your incentive to work. Somewhat similarly, the poverty trap is if you are right on the verge of that poverty line, and you're getting a certain amount of income. Now, if you find a job, but you lose $1 of government aid for every dollar that you make, it may come out that it's not worth your while to take that job. Okay, so the answer would be they have to find a percentage that is low enough that still keeps folks with an incentive to work. And it's a tightrope walk. It's difficult. It's hard to do. Okay. Anyway, so let's talk about the causes of poverty. Number one cause of poverty, single parenthood. Being a single mother or being a single father, I don't know how some people do it. I've had students that were raising children at the same time. They were going to school. They were trying to work one or two jobs. It's amazing. I mean, they should have been teaching me economics. But that is a really, really tough situation when you're trying to raise a family and you're trying to, work a job and get ahead. It is extremely difficult. So, number one cause is single parenthood. Number two is low education. In general, the lower your education, rule of thumb, typically the less you will make, because the less skills you have, okay? We talk about wage differentials, and that goes to skills that you have. Okay, so it's similar with low education. Number three is part-time work only. You're working 24, 28 hours, 29 hours, and you want to work full-time, but the company doesn't want to put you on full-time because, and this happens so often, especially lately, where companies are hesitant to bring you on full-time. Why? Because then they have to pay you all the benefits. It's just much cheaper to keep you on a part-time basis. Okay? All right. But that is, and it's no fault of your own. You could be you're working hard as you can, but you can't live in 24 or 28 hours a week. All right? Number four is poor health. And that happens, People, and sometimes it's a snowball effect. You don't have a lot of money, so you don't take care of yourself. You don't take care of yourself. You're more prone to getting ill. So, and it one reinforces the other. So poor health is one. Discrimination, and there's all sorts of discrimination. Age, race, religion. Age discrimination for me. If I went to apply for a job, and one of you were applying for the same job, maybe I have a couple more years of experience, but if I was the owner of the company, quite frankly, I would hire you. Because if they're going to spend a lot of money training a person, why would they train me when they can train you and they can get so many more years out of you than they can get out of me? I mean, not that I'm going anywhere in the very near future, but, there's all sorts of discrimination. Okay. And it's just plain bad luck. Some folks, it's just, I don't know, they get a negative mindset and it seems to hold true. You believe something bad's going to happen, and sometimes it does. I've known people that think that way. And it's amazing how your thoughts can go out and be like self-fulfilling prophecies. So just plain bad luck. So just as an aside, keep a positive attitude. It will help, believe me. All right, so income, that's causes of poverty, income inequality. Well, here, ability. That's, number one. Obviously, if someone is much more capable at something, they're probably going to get a higher wage. All right? Education and training. And a lot of these blend together, but there's some slight differences. Discrimination again. Income inequality. Where were you born rich or were you born poor? I went to school with some extremely wealthy students. Now, not to say one thing for another, but some of these students, I mean, even if they just did average, even if they just did okay in the schoolwork and even in their work, they came from such wealthy families that they were going to do very well no matter what. I'm not saying all of them. I mean, all of them, a lot of them were very, very hard workers. But if you were born wealthy, you have great connections, you have so many more doors open to you then let's face it, if you're born poor. I'm not trying to say that the wealthy don't work hard. Wealthy people can work very, very hard. But if you're going to say, well, would you rather be born rich or poor? Chances are you'd say rich, because your chances of getting a higher income is going to be much greater. Okay, and political corruption. Not so much in our country, but in other countries, you've got to bribe folks to do this or that. That can definitely wreck the equality of income, or how it should be. Going back to the Gini coefficient, whether you mark it 0 to 1 or 0 to 100, 0 is perfect. Meaning, Gini coefficient, they take the society divided into 5 segments and then compare it to the percent of income. Now, if it was completely equal, each fifth of the society would get 20% of the income. Then the Gini coefficient would be 0. If the top section got 100% of the income, then it would be 1, or 100%, 100. Some books say 1. Our textbook starts out talking 1, but then they say you multiply it by 100. Doesn't matter. The Lorenz curve kind of reinforces what the Gini coefficient is talking about. We've got income and population. Perfectly distributed would look like this line. In 1968, well, we had gone to 39, all right? And then in the year 2010, income became more unequal. It went to 44. So we are moving somewhat in the wrong direction in that respect, but that's how that would work. All right? Okay, so that takes us now to the last 2 sections, which will be your last video. And we're going to talk about behavioral economics. Quite honestly, you could talk about behavioral economics for a long, long time and never come up with the right answer, because sometimes just when you think someone's going to do something for a certain reason, because they're, again, trying to maximize their happiness, they'll do something completely the opposite. And the last topic, which we'll be spending probably a little bit more time on, is globalization. And we'll be looking at that and seeing how over the last 20 years globalization has really taken off. But now, during this bout where this world is going through with this virus, what's that going to do to globalization? You know, it's one of those interesting economic questions that, don't worry, that won't be a question on your test, but it just is going to be something that will be interesting to see what happens. Okay? All right, so everybody, stay well, stay healthy. We got one more video, and then we have a test on Friday. Now, I'm going to open up the test on Friday. You can take all day Friday, and you can have, I'll give you all day Saturday to take it. But you've got to take it Friday or Saturday, because I've got to get the last grades in. Everybody's doing pretty darn well, so I'm happy about that. But you've got Friday or Saturday, that's a week from Friday, and a week from Saturday, to take this exam, all right? And again, there will be, it'll be 5-question essays. There will be a time limit, so don't, pause it and go off and do something. But that'll be our last test, okay? I'm sorry we had to finish the semester this way. I had quite a few in-class exercises that would have been a lot of fun. But we'll have to, hopefully I'll see you again. Maybe we'll do it in an intermediate economics class. So everybody stay well, and I will see you in the last recording.